Yeah, it's really difficult to compare the pre-COVID environment to the present environment, but certainly having seen Sean over a 7-year period and worked with or talked with family and friends that have also experienced his book or his talks or Orange Frog and the research that's come from all of that, it's quite a difficult element to compare. Undoubtedly, his work was just as effective then and is probably even more necessary now. Of course, we've added variables for students, for staff, for administrators, and really for our society that make optimism and positivity and happiness more complicated. So his work's more valid, more critical now than ever. But certainly, looking back at 7 years and adding the impact of COVID and the stress and the medical challenges that's caused on everyone in our world, it's certainly a different culture and experience now that we need to continue to work through. Well, when we talk about social connection being perhaps the most critical element to achieve optimism, our being forced into social isolation and Zoom being the closest thing we could achieve to interconnection, we've immediately cut off our best path to happiness. And so you combine that with the anxiety, the depression, the isolation, the medical challenges, and frankly the extreme fear that COVID caused and still may be causing for many of us. There's no doubt overcoming that challenge, bringing people back together, recalibrating, improving our collaborative structures, helping people reconnect, developing that social connection, and continuing to utilize the best practice strategies like gratitude and writing positive letters to people. Implementing that was always a challenge, just like it is for those of us that want to exercise and diet to the best of our ability. It takes a full commitment, but on the positive side, we have the same opportunity we had pre-COVID to now to do this work, to commit ourselves, and to help one another. Yeah, I think the statistical evidence is there. A study that I read recently indicated that educators felt 50% more stress during the course of the pandemic than frontline workers did. So in terms of the impact on school culture and how we feel, I see there's not only that quantitative difference, but qualitatively we can experience it. It's compounded by teacher shortages, challenges that students and the community are facing. But I have no doubt that the structures that have always led us to success can continue to do so. By working together, by supporting one another, by applying practices and implementing what we know works, we can continue to improve our own happiness, improve our collective happiness, and most importantly, support our staff so that we can best support our students. Yeah, I saw the impact that Sean had roughly 7 years ago on a large school district. I saw the impact of his research, his writings, the Orange Frog trainings that can either support or follow Sean's terrific work. And it was obvious then that that's what educators and students and communities needed. It was glaringly obvious that there's nothing more that we need right now than to commit ourselves to optimism and gratitude, which we know will lead to success for everyone and all of our stakeholders. Haven't been in education for a while, and I assume this crosses job sectors. There can be a facetious take on any new initiative, whether it's curriculum, whether it's cultural, whether it's structural. And undoubtedly, there's a right way to go about implementing this work. But anytime we ask people to self-reflect and to change in any sector of life, it certainly takes a commitment of the whole as well as us as individuals. And I think there's a best practice way to minimize that concern. And I think sometimes attitudes change after behaviors do. So if we can figure out how to take those first steps, share those first 3 gratitudes, write that first positive note to someone, exercise for 15 minutes for a few days, if we can start to change our behavior, that in turn will undoubtedly change our attitude and our mindset, and the ripple effect can go from there. Sean's work and Orange Frog, as I've seen those implemented in districts, we've seen schools simultaneously increasing student learning at the same time that the quantitative measures that they have to measure culture and engagement and happiness were increasing in parallel to the success of the students. So undoubtedly, when we train our minds towards the best paths of optimism, we've seen quantitative student learning growth soar at the same time that we've seen cultures improve. Yeah, absolutely. There is no doubt that extraordinary educators take best practices at every training they're at, and obviously when we get a training with one of the most foremost experts in the world on optimism and happiness, teachers immediately will think selflessly and will take this work maybe for themselves, but certainly back to their classrooms. And on Monday, I suspect I'll see, like I have in the past, teachers immediately bringing to the age-appropriate level of their students the tactics and strategies that Sean describes, and helping our students utilize those in ways that train them at a young age, whereas I had to learn this more or less in my 40s. We can build these habits and sustain this success, much like we've recognized teaching an instrument at a young age or teaching a foreign language at a young age is easier to acquire and to learn. I'm not sure if someone else has the research on it yet, but I'm certain if we can train kids at 3, 4, and 5 years old to apply these strategies and sustain those for the rest of their life, it has to be a lot easier than it is for some of us as adults. We often see, specific to professional learning communities, that implementation is hard because, like focusing on happiness, it requires change. Education in the United States and in most countries for decades, if not over a century, we were relying on individual teachers to go into their classrooms and do the best they could for their students every day, and educators across this country and around the world did that. Professional learning communities ask us to work collaboratively, to learn from one another, to share best practice strategies and implement those best practice strategies together with our students, so that if we learn more as educators, our students are of course going to learn more. And much like Sean's writings in Big Potential, we're better together. And so districts often struggle to make that shift, to take educators who have often worked individually and done a masterful job, and now arrange them in teams and ask them to share data and best practice and research and adjust their practices to help their students learn at the highest possible level. But when we do that, when we combine professional learning communities with this work, we're putting people together in purposeful teams. We're helping each other learn both academic practices as well as optimism and happiness and mindset and grit. And when we do those things together, much like the medical field, much like we see at Mayo Clinic when doctors come together to share strategies to solve profound, complex medical conditions, we can do the same thing in education when we bring great minds together, our teachers, to help our kids be successful. In a word, limitless. If we can teach our children the strategies to create these habits at a young age, their opportunity to then impact others, the ripple effect our kids can have on each other throughout their learning, throughout their K-12 ed, of course into college and beyond, and then as future leaders in our society. I'm not sure there's a better way to change the world than to bring positive psychology to our kids, to get it to them early and often, create those habits so that they can implement them and share them with their friends, their family, their children eventually, and we can create a whole new way of seeing the world based on this research that's telling us the way we've seen it in the past is totally malleable, and we can change our outcomes because of it. It's tricky. Education, perhaps more so than in any other field, we've caused death by initiative. And I would say this. I would say acting as a professional learning community and supporting the mindset of our staff and ultimately our kids, that is the it. Everything else is what we should be considering, whether we should implement it and add it to our plate. But positive psychology, mindset, culture, and operating as a professional learning community, that should serve as the foundation, and then we should be strategic from there if there's anything else we want to implement or initiate or change. But these really serve as the foundational pieces that will drive success with every other initiative that comes forward. Absolutely. We know that when we look at kids and whether they're successful or whether that they're struggling, in education we look at response to intervention or multi-tiered systems of support. And we often consider kids having either strengths or challenges in academics or strengths and challenges social, emotionally, or behaviorally. And undoubtedly, we need both to work hand in hand for our kids to be successful. I've never seen a child who's confident and excited about school and learning and carries that excitement onto their adulthood who can't read, write, and do math. Conversely, excelling in reading, writing, and math is not necessarily a predictor of happiness and success once we're done with K-12 or at any point throughout the journey of K-12 education. So we need to combine the elements of whole child success, which are those social emotional pieces and those academic pieces, to help our kids be successful.